Do you want Detroit sports talk done right?
Yeah!
If you want it, you got it. It's Detroit sports talk with attitude. It's the Knee Jerks with Eno and Big Al.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like at this time to introduce to you one of the finest running backs in the United States of America, and our number one pick, Barry Sanders.
Here's Isaiah. Let's see what we got. All the way up. Go!
We might not be in your car or on your transistor radio, but we're bringing you the best of Detroit sports past, present, and future. It's time for the Knee Jerks with two guys who know Detroit sports. Here's Greg Eno and Al Beaton.
It's June 1st, 2021. The day the pandemic ended, if you want to believe some people, at the very least, we'll talk about it later, about how essentially outdoor venues are open for business, essentially. But that also means time for the Knee Jerks, Detroit Sports Talk with Eno and Big Al. I am the Big Al of the equation, longtime Detroit-based podcaster Al Beaton. Joining me, as always, is the man who knows a lot of things about a lot of things, who makes a mean-ass cocktail, and actually you should see his Sunday dinners, and that would be Greg Eno. What's up, Greg?
You better watch quick if you want to see my Sunday dinners before they end up in my belly. Thanks, Al. I am Greg Eno from my Out of Bounds WordPress blog. You can check me out pretty much every Monday. This time I had a piece out on Tuesday because of the holiday. Follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. Follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. Good to be with you, Al. 12 years, my friend. We just surpassed the 12-year mark. This is kind of officially the start of season 13.
Holy crap, I was in my 40s when we started this damn show.
That's right. And here we are, and we are going to be celebrating throughout the summer by bringing back some favorite guests, and we're going to start that off tonight by bringing back
summer, in other words, huh?
Yeah, we're just going to kind of spread it out.
The summer of the Knee Jerks.
Yeah, we'll spread it out. We're going to start tonight with Bob Page, one of our favorite guests. Bob was one of the first guests we had in 2009, and that started a relationship that was very fun and very entertaining. And then Bob went and started his No Filter Sports podcast, which ran for a couple of years, and we didn't really have Bob on at that time. But then when the pandemic hit, and a lot of things happened, so he is no longer doing the podcast, and he's gonna tell us in this interview we're gonna run right now, which we pre-recorded, why they're not doing the podcast. I think you might be a little bit interested to find out exactly why they're not doing it, and you may also be sad to know that it doesn't look like the podcast is going to be back. He tells us that, and we went through a whole gamut of things with Bob, with covering pretty much all the Detroit sports and his take on some national situations as well. So we'll play that interview for you right now. I don't think has any clue where he was last week, let alone where he was in 2009 when he talked to us for the first time on this program. And I say that because Bob Page makes jokes all the time about his own memory, so I'm not telling tales out of school. But Bob was one of our first guests, Al, as you know, back in 2009 when we started this podcast, about almost 12 years to the day. And he's come on the program, been gracious enough to come on many, many times since then, and has not been on since he got involved with Eli Zaret and Denny McClain with the No Filters podcast, which was one of my favorite listens. I would, back in the day when I was actually going to the office before the pandemic instead of working from home, those guys would take me home every night from work. I put them on as soon as I got in the car in the parking lot in Farmington Hills, and I listened to them right up until the time I pulled in the driveway in Madison Heights. And it was a lot of fun listening to those guys talk. And we're going to talk to Bob a little bit about what happened with No Filter Sports and what the future may be for that. But right now, I just want to bring him in and welcome him back and say, Bob, thanks for joining us once again.
I thought you guys fell out of love with me. I mean, I didn't hear from you from 2 years or something like that. And I thought it was, maybe I was a little more outrageous than usual and said something I shouldn't have and wouldn't be ever invited back again.
It's that no compete clause that we have that you can't.
Oh, that's what it was. I never signed that though.
Bob is here. Ray Scott's. It's funny. Ray Scott said the same thing to us. Ray had gone about over a year between visits, and he said, "Gosh, guys, I thought you didn't love me anymore." I guess these knee-jerk guests have these inferiority complexes, Al. If we don't bring them on every so often, I think that's what that's all about.
We've been selfish, just doing our own rants and leaving everybody else out of it for a while.
Exactly.
By the way, is there a nicer man out there anywhere than Ray Scott?
Oh,
nope.
No, not. Very few people are as nice as Ray. He's one of my favorites. He and I are. He's on social media, and I'll tell you what. For an 82-year-old dude, he is pretty damn active on social media. He's like the kids are nowadays.
The funny thing about it is, we all mellow, they say, as we grow older.
Right.
And so when I was covering the Pistons, way back when, and Ray was the head coach. Of course, I'd grown up in Detroit watching him play for the Pistons. Kobo used to go all the time. So I'm right behind the bench, and something happened in the game, and Ray leaps up out of his seat, all 6'9" of him, and he says, and he screams at one of the officials, "Call the effing," but he didn't say effing, used the word, "You asshole!" And I've never seen Ray Scott like that, And I'm sure, obviously, he would not remember the incident, but I remember thinking, "Geez, Ray's such a nice guy," But
Ray had one of my favorite quotes after he was named head coach after they fired Earl Lloyd. They said, "How do you feel about taking over for your friend?" He said, "Well, it's kind of bittersweet." He said, "It's kind of like watching your mother-in-law drive your Mercedes off a cliff."
That's pretty good, actually. Is that his line?
I thought that was pretty good too. So, and I reminded him that he remembered that he had said it, because it was like 1971. I said, "Do you remember saying this?" He said he laughed. He said, "Oh, I do remember saying that." So anyway, Bob is here, and thanks for doing this. And before we get into what we want to talk about with Detroit sports and sports in general, why don't you just kind of, because I confess to being ignorant about this, so this is literally to enlighten me as well as the listeners. What is going on with No Filter? I know that you're not in production right now, but can you tell us about what happened, and if you do plan on going back into production?
My buddy Eli Zaret, my best friend in the business for, what's it been, 45 years or something like that, and I don't mind saying this, and he gets pissed at me, and I don't care if he's pissed at me. I mean, we talk all the time. Still, I was on the phone with him a few days ago. He flaked on us. He he decided all of a sudden that he didn't want to be on the show anymore, do the show anymore, and he didn't even want to be a sportscaster anymore. So, I mean, it was very frustrating, because Denny and I kept thinking, well, look, okay, give him some space. We'll go on. We'll do the show. It's going to be fine. Just give him a little time. He's going to come back. And Denny would always say, "Oh, don't worry, he'll be back in another month." I said, "I don't know." And Eli kept saying, I'm not going to do it again. So, well, okay. And I told him, and if I do say so myself, and with apologies to you guys, this is the best sports talk show that the Detroit market ever had.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're true there. Oh my God, it's awful right now.
Thank you very much. Well, why would you do this? Now, we weren't making any money. I mean, we were making some money, but just a little amount of money on the show. Yeah. Eli certainly doesn't need any money. It wasn't anywhere near what he thought and what he said we would make, and I think that disappointed him. And even though he's one of those guys where he has a lot of money he could never spend, but no amount of money is ever enough money, and he doesn't live a profligate lifestyle or an ostentatious lifestyle at all. I think my personal opinion, he can deny it all he wants, is that he was very disappointed in that and thought that maybe he could make a little more money doing something new. He does have a reputation, which he would admit, from kind of flitting from project to project over the years. That's his MO. It's what he does. And it's just the way it wound up. So it was extremely disappointing to me. It was extremely disappointing to Denny McClain. But that's the way it is, and so you just kind of go on with your life. I mean, I don't know. There's nothing else I can say, fellas. That's just the way it went down. And I don't think the show is ever coming back.
Well, it should be noted for those who may not know that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, this show was Eli's idea, no?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. And now this flaking that you're talking about, was there any warning to this? Did he give you guys a heads up, or was this just lost contact?
That's a good question. Only towards the very, very end did he start to say he was getting tired and thinking about doing it. Only the very, very end. Uh-huh. And then he just said he didn't want to do it anymore. So he said to me over the phone last week, we were just BSing. He said the show was dysfunctional, the advertisers were dysfunctional, so on and so forth. And we had, if you don't mind my telling tales out of school, we sometimes had the same difficulties you guys just had before we did this interview. Right. You just have a little technical glitch or something. Mm-hmm. Something goes wrong, and you got to get it right and set it up. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which we always did. And Brandon McAfee, our producer, did a really good job. And Drew Lane was a great champion of the show. For those who don't know, the Drew and Mike show, we did it out of Drew's studio, which is in his home in suburban Detroit. And he was great. I mean, it was a lot of fun. And, if you listen to younger people do talk radio, if you do, and it's just a whole different thing. It's all about, bitchin' babes and brewskis and stuff like that. And we did the show obviously on a different level with respect to maturity. But more than that, the guests we had on were guests who really wanted to come on because nobody talks to them that much anymore. Right. And that would be anybody from Ray Scott to Rocky Colavito to it's just so many, Jake Wood. I mean, I could go
Wayne
on
Fonts,
and on and on.
Wayne Fonts.
Well, of course. Yeah, we had all these, that anybody over the age, anybody who's especially from Detroit and over the age of arbitrarily 45 or 50 would love to hear from. And that's why the show, I think, was so popular in that particular demographic. Obviously, advertisers don't want that demographic. They think that young people have all the discretionary income. They want people in the demographic from, let's just say, 21, 34. And so that's why you have all these young guys on the radio right now, and they're doing what young guys do. They're extremely passionate about sports, which Eli was not anymore, and he'd be the first to admit it to you. Mm-hmm. And they're extremely knowledgeable for the most part about all four of our major sports. And Denny McClain would never admit this, but he knew nothing about hockey, nothing. Right. And didn't follow a lot of other things as well. He was an NFL guy, a gambling guy, and of course he followed baseball and followed the Detroit Tigers basketball. So he was fairly knowledgeable about that. But I don't know. I loved doing the show. Eli said, "Oh, it's so much work, so much work," and my rejoinder was always, "I do more work than you." I mean, I was the one who watched. I was the one who watched all the games. Why? Because I love to watch all the games, and I still watch all the games. I was the one who took copious notes during the games. I was the one, especially. I was the hockey guy on the show. In a market like Detroit, don't you think you need that? Eli's never been a hockey guy at all. So I love doing the show, and I really miss it. And Denny misses it. And I'm on Twitter, I think, as most people know. It's just at Bob Page Sports. And God, I still hear from people constantly, "Oh, we missed the show so much, Bob. Is there any chance you're going to come back, or can't you do the show by yourself?" Which I really can't, for various logistic reasons. But so it is what it is, fellas, and we move on with our lives.
Did who was primarily responsible for getting those guests? Was that Brandon's job, or was that all three of you?
No, God, Brandon's job. No, you guys know yourself. You got to have contacts. You got to know people to get guests. Mm-hmm. I would say, just off the top of my head, I would say Eli got 50% of the guests. Mm-hmm. I would say I got 35% of the guests, and maybe Denny got the other 15 or 30-20, something like that. Eli, as you know, has never left Detroit. He still lives there, and he's out on the town a lot, and he plays a hell of a lot of golf. And he still does speaking engagements. So he sees people all the time. He talks to people all the time. I've lived in New York City and environs now for going on this fall 33 years. Mm-hmm. And when I'm not living in New York City, I live where I am right now, my legal residence, which is West Palm Beach, Florida. So I'm just not there. I'm not hooked up anymore. I'm not part of that scene. And my Rolodex, to use the term metaphorically, my Rolodex just isn't, what it used to be. I don't have a lot of guys' phone numbers anymore, Anyway.
We're talking with Bob Page, former Detroit and New York sportscaster, and most recently the one of the triumvirate of the No Filter Sports podcast, which apparently is no longer, which is sad. I want to ask about you mentioned talk radio a few minutes ago. You talked about the age of the hosts and so forth, and the demographic and what have you. I'm not really sure how to ask this question, so bear with me because I might fumble through it. But I think about guys like Valente here in Detroit, Mike Valente, and other people, and who I see do this kind of a thing, who've never, and I could be wrong about this. I don't think Mike Valente has stepped into a locker room in his life. I know I've probably been in locker rooms more than he has.
I met the young man only once in my life, and I know he grew up in upstate New York watching me on TV as a kid. And I have a lot of respect for what he's accomplished in Detroit. He's very talented, but I was very disappointed when somebody told me this just within the last year. He does not go to games. He does not go into locker rooms. He's not doing his job then.
He's not even on social media.
And that's what's leading me to my question is, does it rankle you, or just comment, I'm leading you by saying rankle, but just comment on the notion of guys who do this kind of a thing, who never have to face up to the people that they lacerate on the radio or on wherever their platform is, never have to face, we all grew up in the days of Al Ackerman and so forth, where Al would say it. I always said that Al would never say anything to you that he wouldn't say to your face. And
look, I worked with Al. I worked with Al Ackerman.
But of course, but that's one of the reasons why I bring him up. But what is your feeling about people like this who purport to be these voices who, like you said, aren't really totally doing the job? For some reason, to me, that just doesn't equate. And I want to get your take on that.
Well, as I was starting to say, the reason I started to say that I work with Al Ackerman is because I never saw Al in a locker room. But he had an excuse. And Eli had an excuse, too, all those years in Detroit, because if you're doing the 6 and 11, it's awful hard to get down to the ballpark, get in a locker room. Now, when I was a nighttime television anchor in New York City all those years, I made sure I got in the locker room on the weekends. I took my off days, and I would go to the Yankee Stadium or Shea or whatever it was, and I would go into the locker rooms then. So to me, it's not a job, it's not work, and Eli vehemently disagrees with me about this. I tell him I never worked a day in my adult life. He says, oh, no, what I did was work. It was work. It was deadline pressure. Okay, fine. I had deadline pressure myself big time, but I never felt it was work. And so for me, it was fun to go down to the ballpark or come down to a Rangers game at the Garden or whatever I was going to do and go in. And I felt it was important to kind of establish relationships with subjects, sports subjects. Some people don't. In the case, and since you mentioned Mike Valente, I mean, this young guy is on the radio in the afternoon in Detroit, right? Which means he's free all night, which means if I were in Mike Valente's spot, I would be every single night. And I don't think he's married, is he, with a family, responsibilities and obligations like that. I would be, after I get off my shift, I'd go down to the ballpark or down to Little Caesars Arena. I'd have dinner in the press room, BS with guys before the game, talk with the players, go into the locker rooms afterward. Unless he's afraid that, I don't listen to him. I don't live in Detroit, and I don't listen to sports talk radio. But unless he's afraid that some of the stuff he's saying is so controversial that he's going to be challenged by people if he goes into a locker room. And that's happened to me any number of times, I guarantee you. So, I don't know, Mike. I don't know what it is. And we're just talking about him, but I guess maybe there are other guys in Detroit, I wouldn't know this, who are the same way. All the years I worked in New York, I never saw Mike Francesa in a locker room. I don't think I ever saw Chris Russo in a locker room. They established relationships because they got these guys on their show. If you don't know who they are, they were on WFAN, which is the biggest talk show in New York. So, I don't know. I guess we all approach it. It doesn't matter what we do for a living, for lawyers, doctors, whatever we do. We approach our jobs from different viewpoints sometimes, and that's just mine. And I guess that's just Mike Valente's. It just is what it is.
We're talking with Bob Page here on the Knee-Jerks. I'm Greg Eno, and of course, being joined here by Big Al Beaton. Let's bring Big Al in. What you got for Bob Page?
Yeah, since we're talking about sports talk radio and your experiences and keeping up with things. Here in Detroit, obviously we only have one sports talk station. We all know the one we're talking about. And when the Anthony Mantha trade went down, huge news. Trading with your top winger for a number 1 draft pick, and it's blowing up the top line. And listening to the sports talk radio hosts in this town be completely out of their element. They had no idea what to talk about when it came to hockey because it was obvious they were paying no attention to the team at all. I mean, it really feels like, I think you say this for a lot of sports talk radio, Bob, is that a lot of these guys care about the NFL and that everything else is an afterthought. And for a hardcore sports fan, I don't know about you, but these guys need to be a little more generalist than specialist when it comes to this mainstream sports talk radio. It drove me nuts hearing callers know more about the Red Wings than the afternoon host on 97.1 did. And that's the sort of thing that just drives me nuts about today's media.
I think you're bringing up an excellent point. And I have been told, and again, I'm not there. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I have been told by Eli. I've been told by our producer, Brandon McAnee. I've been told by a couple other people that hockey is no longer a big ticket in Detroit. I have been told, frankly, quote, no one cares about hockey anymore. Mm-hmm. I find that hard to believe. In Hockeytown? No one cares about hockey? And to me, I mean, the Wings were just always a huge ticket in Detroit. And when I lived in Detroit, you'd be driving somewhere in June or July or August, and you turn on sports talk radio, and the callers would be calling in with Red Wings questions. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if this is the case, I'm shocked that hockey has plummeted to the extent that it has. Now, I do understand that maybe that people pre-pandemic were not coming down to the games. Tennis wasn't great, and I would chalk that up to Detroit fans being spoiled because the Wings won 4 cups in 11 years. And then all of a sudden, they go and make the playoffs 25 straight years. And then, pro sports is cyclical, and the team goes bad, and they're in this constant rebuilding mode. It's been awful. But so maybe they're fair weather fans there now. I really don't know. I don't know what to say. It's just it's disappointing. It's hard to believe, but it's disappointing.
Well, just to follow up on that, I mean, we're in a historical doldrums here in Detroit when it comes to sports being any good. Do you remember any time, going back in your times working in both Detroit and New York, where things were this bad
not working. Yeah, people have been analyzing this. Not working in Detroit because my first year in the business was 1974, and I started in Lansing. So I didn't come down to work in Detroit until 1975. But from what I read, 1972 was actually the worst year ever for Detroit. Well, it can't be 72 because the Tigers obviously won the American League East that year. But it was 71, or there was one year that was even worse collectively among the 4 teams than it is now. But it's just brutal. And you made a comment about Detroit being a pro football town, which of course it always has been.
Right.
When I was a kid growing up, the sun rose and set on the Lions, but that's because they were coming off those amazing years in the 1950s when they dominated professional football. So the franchise, ever since late 1963, when Billy Ford bought it, has been an abomination. It's been a total joke, and still these people come back. Most of them, clutching their rumpled 20s and 50s, crawling on hands and knees to the box office, saying, "Please, sir, can I have some more, sir?" It just doesn't make any sense to me. But that's what's going on. And if this latest head coach somehow does start to win some games, I mean, they're going to go crazy in Detroit over this team. I quit my habit a long time ago. I gave up a long time ago. I'm interested in the New York Giants and the New York Jets. I have no interest in the Detroit Lions other than watching them lose every game in as embarrassingly a fashion.
Yeah, hold on. I got to call you out on the. Hold on. I got to call you out here on the Jets. If you think the Lions are dysfunctional, come on now. The New York Jets, Bob, come on. The Jets are.
Let me ask you a question.
The Lions of the AFC.
Let me ask you a question. How many Super Bowls have the Detroit Lions been to?
0.
How many Super Bowls have the New York Jets been to?
1.
How many Super Bowls did the New York Jets win?
1.
That's right. And there's your answer right there.
Oh,
At least the Jets. And by the way, don't forget, look, under Rex Ryan, this club went to 2 AFC championship games within, 4 or 5 years? How many NFC championship games?
The overall body of work, the overall body of work of the New York Jets in the National Football League is
the Jets are better.
You know it. Not much.
Yeah, no, the Jets are better. But
no, they're not. They couldn't. Now they're on their second franchise quarterback in 4 years. Are they not?
It's a joke.
Whatever happened to Darnold?
Are you forgetting Mark Sanchez? You're not mentioning
Sanchez.
him.
Yeah, that was another one.
Right.
Sanchez.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. The Jets have been, blithering incompetence. There's no question about that. But,
let me ask you about the Tigers.
The Lions are going to lick themselves. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to talk about the Tigers. I want to talk, but specifically, not so much. We'll talk about the on-field product in a second, but we're kind of keeping in this theme of broadcasting, and I'm interested in your take on this because, you like us have we all grew up on this phone call here. We all grew up with George Kell and Ernie Harwell and so forth. What do you think, Bob, about the way that Bally Sports Detroit? Because I know you watch the Tigers on the dish. What do you think about the way Bally Sports is doing? You don't watch them? You don't watch them?
No. I often wonder, besides the obvious drag on attendance, I often wonder, A, what their television ratings are, and what if they really realize how much money they're truly losing, because I always paid for Major League Baseball extra innings so I could see every Tigers game. And as recently as, 3 years ago, I probably saw at least 140 Tiger games every year. I haven't bought it the last couple of years. I don't watch. The only Tigers game I think I've seen in quite a while now, because it was on the MLB Network, was Saturday's win over the Yankees. I'm not spending my time watching this garbage.
My question is still relevant then because it's still because what I'm about to ask you still happened when you were getting that package, and that is the Tigers have this mentality of having 1 million announcers. I mean, they just have so many announcers: Petrie, Gibson, Morris, Monroe. Many guys in the booth.
The Yankees do that too.
What do you like that? Do you these different voices in that you, or do you still like having like the Mets have with Hernandez and Darling?
Yeah,
who I think are a great combo. But I mean, or do you like this idea of having lots of different announcers?
Well, that's the best local broadcast team I've ever heard, the Mets broadcast team of Darling and Keith Hernandez and Gary Cohen.
Right.
But even then, sometimes these guys will take a day off. There'll be only 2 of them on or something like that. That's just the way it is. Yankees have a number of guys who do this. They rotate just like the Tigers do. I don't really have an opinion on that. I've never really thought about it much. I guess it brings different viewpoints. But if the viewpoints are not 100% honest viewpoints, as in the case with the Detroit announcers, as is not the case with the Yankees announcers, my old colleague from MSG, Michael Kay, Paul O'Neill, John Flaherty, David Cohn, believe me, they're highly critical of the New York Yankees on the air when the circumstances merit it. And you don't get a lot of that in Detroit from what I've heard, from the Tigers announcers. I don't know, I don't know what they're afraid of. It's just they seem to constantly be sugarcoating everything when I've heard them. They seem to be sucking up, the Tigers management, the players, the manager, the coaches. I don't know. I don't think it's a very good listen, but again, I don't listen anymore. So, you guys just have to deal with that if you're still into the Tigers and you're watching the games. So last week, I'm out of my car down here in South Florida, and I happen to be talking to my daughter, who lives back up in Detroit in the suburbs. As you know, Greg, you've been over there to her house before. And it's just like 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and the subject of the Tigers came up, and I said, you know what, it just dawned on me. I have no idea how they did last night. I said, even as bad as they've been, generally the first thing I do in the morning when I get on the Internet is I check to see how the Tigers did last night. I just didn't even think about it. And I didn't think about it today either. And my daughter, who was a huge Tigers fan, especially the '84 team, she said, no, I don't know either. I have no idea whether they won or lost last night. We don't watch. In my house, we don't pay attention. I mean, that's pathetic. It's pathetic. It really is.
We're talking with Bob Page on the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg Eno, and of course, Big Al Beaton is with me. I'll bring Big Al in a second. But just from afar, we touched briefly on this sad sack Detroit sports thing here. What do you make of that? I mean, I know that sports is cyclical. I get it. But gosh, to have 4 teams at the same time just wandering around in the desert without any sort of, of the 4, from your perspective, which of the 4 do you think has the best shot of finally breaking out of this rebuilding thing and actually making some noise?
That's an easy question to answer, and you already know what the answer to that is. In Stevie Y, we trust the Wings are going to be the first one to break out. They've got some good young players coming up. They're going to be fine, and they could be a contender even within a couple of years from now.
Right.
So I think they're the first one. You got one owner, of course, of 2 of the 4 teams that you mentioned. I don't know what the Illiches are doing with the Tigers. I don't know. Denny McClain always felt and said on our show that they were positioning the team, getting rid of all the high-salaried guys, except for, of course, Miggy. You can't get rid of him. They were positioning the team to be sold. I don't know. Chris Illich has denied that they're for sale. I don't know. Unfortunately, the Fords will never sell the team. They have Sheila Hemp Ford or whatever her name is. This is a joke. It's ridiculous. And I just don't understand what Tom Gores is doing with the Pistons. It's more churning. Then they bring in this general manager who I guess was a vice president or something. Where was he, in Oklahoma City or some place like that? And the first thing this guy does is he comes in, he totally turns the roster over. He just churns the roster. I'm a hoops junkie. I was a gym rat, and I love the game, and I watch a lot of NBA games. Not the Detroit Pistons, but I watch a lot of NBA games. Watching a lot of playoff games now. And every time I turn on a game, it seems like almost every team has some ex-Piston who's a major contributor whom the Pistons got rid of.
That's true.
I don't know.
I know. Somebody made a list on Twitter. I saw it. Somebody asked the question, how many ex-Pistons are in the playoffs right now? Just kind of like just asking the question. And somebody responded with this long list of, like you said, not just bench players either. I mean, a long list of guys who are key. Everybody from Chris Middleton to Marcus Morris to Tobias Harris, you name it. Of course, Blake Griffin and so forth. And the list was staggering. That is a little bit grinding as well. Big Al, what you got for Bob Page? Sorry, go ahead.
So now they say that, whatever Gores, I don't remember the specific figures, but whatever Gores paid for the Pistons, he could flip them tomorrow and make more billions that he doesn't need. So I don't know. Is that what he's trying to do? Does he want to sell the franchise? I don't get it, but it's really, really sad to see what's going on back there. It really is.
Al, what you got for Bob?
Yeah, well, obviously, since we're just coming out of a pandemic, we should at least touch on the past year of a very odd sports environment, Bob. And are you surprised? Were you surprised at all
a very
to
odd
see
world environment?
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah, right.
Were you to see some of the actions that the leagues pulled to keep the TV money running in? Really, I hate to say it, but I would hope that more people opened their eyes just to see how these billionaires see the players nothing more as assets, and the fan base is nothing more than dollar signs. Because it really felt like at times over the past year that safety was like third behind just getting the games played, and just making sure the cameras are in place. And I really felt uncomfortable at times seeing what these players had to go through. Like, we talked to Stan Heath, who is now the new head coach at Eastern Michigan, and he was in the G League bubble. And he was telling us how hard it was to live secluded like he did for 2 months just to play in a freaking, a minor league environment. So I can't picture what these ball players and coaches and management people had to deal with. So I guess what I'm asking is, are you surprised to see the owners to be just as despicable as I thought they were?
I don't know. I'm not sure why you phrase it that way. I mean, if you and I owned an NBA team and we were told, well, guess what? You can have a season, but you can't have any fans come to your games.
Yeah.
No one's going to be buying tickets. No one's going to be paying for parking. No one's going to be buying your overpriced concessions. TV ratings are probably going to be down. You and I would say, hell with that. Let's just shut the whole thing down.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't, did they?
Yeah.
They went on, and we know that the owners lost millions and millions and millions of dollars. So I really can't blame the owners for that. I didn't like what happened to the NBA. The NBA, to me, decided it didn't really want to play basketball as much as it wanted to make social statements. And some of the social statements they were making, I didn't care for much. I don't want to come across sounding like a right-winger or a Republican, because I'm not. But you know, I mean, let's concentrate on playing basketball if you want to play basketball. If you want to make social statements like this all the time, I'm not watching. And I didn't. So I'm back now because the NBA's decided it just wants to play basketball again. And now we have fans back at the games. And to see these, I mean, I've been watching the NBA since 1961, maybe, something like that, you know, going to Pistons games for a long, long time back in the early and mid-'60s before covering the team. And these kids today are just, they're unbelievable. It's just the things they can do are unbelievable. Obviously with Steph Curry and Luka and all these guys, they're just incredible. So I think personally it's an entertaining product. A lot of people don't like it because of the emphasis on the three-point shot now, which we never had before. But when people tell me that, I ask them if they've ever actually been to an NBA game and walked down to the court. You get down there and you see how far that shot is.
Yeah.
And when you're taking that shot, you frequently have, you know, a 6'6" guy or two hanging all over you, and you make it anyway. I mean, what Steph Curry's done is just beyond belief. There's never been anything like it in the history of basketball. So I still enjoy it. I still enjoy that.
Well, let me follow up with you on that, though, for a sec. You know, going back to your days in locker rooms in the 70s and 80s, you got to know these players you got to know them really well because you saw them every night. Did they have views that are being exposed publicly today that they were afraid to expose back in the 70s?
Well, that's a good question. I would say absolutely not. I would look back at a former hangout buddy of mine. I don't see him anymore, obviously, but he was in New York. I would look back at what Bill Walton said when he was a player at UCLA. One of his quotes, "If I were black, I'd be out in the streets with a machine gun every day killing people." So you had an awful lot of guys who were making social statements back then about racism in America. Walton in the extreme, obviously, and I'm sure Bill would take that back if he could. But I think what happened is that in light of certain, you know, unfortunate events that have happened in our society, you know, I mean, all these police killings, it just got to the point where people had to speak out.
Yeah.
And they did. And I'm not saying they took it too far, but saying, you know, talking about social issues is one thing with the media after a game. If you come out during a game and everything seems to be about social issues instead of playing the games itself, it's going to turn some people off.
Yeah.
Right. And we have such a divided country politically anyway right now, so you're going to turn a lot of people off with some of the stuff that they did. But they stood up for what they felt was right. I guess you have to respect that. I just wish they would have toned the whole thing down. But hopefully we're past that.
Yeah.
Hopefully we're past this whole pandemic thing. Hopefully we're past that. And hopefully our lives will return to some degree of normalcy now, which they seem to be.
Yeah.
You know, you were talking about the three-point shot, and I was recalling what Dwayne Casey said in his exit interview with the media after the season, and they were asking him about almost exactly that question, like about the reliance on the three-point shot. He said, "Well, you know, he said we like to play defense. Defense is always going to be something we put our emphasis on, but he says it's so hard to stop the three." He says it's just so hard. He says you can go up on a guy like Steph Curry, kind of what Bob just said. He'll just take a step back and he'll still hit the shot. He says so you have to counter fire with fire, and it's all about offense. It's all fans like it. They like these higher scoring games. They like these long 3-point shots and so forth. He says I don't see it going back anytime soon. the pendulum swinging where you did rely on the 3-point shot as much. He said, but it's just so hard, and teams know that. And if you can't be one of those teams that can do that, you're not going to win basketball games. You can play all the great defense you want, but you can't stop a 25-foot jump shot.
You look at Luka Doncic and the way he is abusing a 7-footer in Dallas's current series, because you play up on this guy, and it doesn't matter because he takes 2 steps back. He's almost fallen down. He throws up a 35-foot shot. It's a perfect swish.
Right.
I mean, how you can't defend that. It never existed before. Steph Curry revolutionized the way the game of basketball is being played at that level. Some people don't like it. I mean, I do.
Right.
I don't mind it at all. Some people don't like it. So, I don't know why. I haven't really seen a lot about television ratings for a while. I don't know about any of this stuff. I read so many media sources every day, but for some reason I haven't seen what the Detroit Tigers' local TV ratings are. I haven't seen what the Wings ratings and the Pistons were locally in Detroit this year, or the national NBA ratings. I don't know. But, I still enjoy it. And to me, one of the greatest compliments we got when we were doing our podcast is that, people would write us in my mailbag segment that we did. And just say that during the pandemic, when everything was shut down and so depressing and people were dying of COVID, that we provided some much-needed entertainment and even laughter during that. Right. I felt the same way about, for the most part, the games that were going on. It's entertaining. I hated the fact that you'd watch an NFL game and nobody'd be in the stands.
Right.
I hated that.
Right.
But at least, we had the games and it provided us with some entertainment.
Similar to the 3-point shot, there's been some fans who are not happy with the direction of Major League Baseball either. I read a stat that I guess the overall MLB batting average right now, and I know that batting average is to some people is a metric that you're not supposed to talk about, but it's 236. He says the lowest in many, many, many years. They feel like the game has turned into an all or nothing, strikeout or home run kind of affair. What about baseball? Yeah. You do watch a lot of baseball as well. So what is your thoughts about baseball?
No, I really don't. And I think maybe the main reason for that is, to me, it's just I'm too busy with the basketball and hockey playoffs right now. Look, I mean, so many games on every night. There's only so much you can watch. And so, so for instance, I think this is going to be a pretty good series right now. I'm recording as we speak, or is it that time yet? Yeah, I'm recording as we speak. I think this Tampa-Carolina Hurricanes series is going to be pretty good. And then later on tonight, I'm going to the Portland-Dallas series. I'm watching that because I love to watch Luka. So that's 2 games right there. So it's like I'm watching 2 or 3 games every day. And the baseball isn't interesting yet, and the Tigers suck. And I'm down here in Florida, and I don't like the Marlins or Tampa Bay. I'll be back in New York probably pretty soon. Maybe I'll watch a little bit more then. I really don't watch a lot of baseball. It doesn't turn me off. I mean, the home run is the most exciting play in the game, and there sure are a lot of those. And there's a lot of great pitching out there right now. This kid, whom you don't get to see in Detroit, Jacob deGrom, is one of the greatest pitchers I've ever seen in my life. He's unbelievable. And it's like every time you look up, some of these kids are throwing 100 miles an hour. So a lot of the pitching is pretty good, too, hence all the strikeouts. But so I think baseball is probably still a pretty entertaining product. And as I said, maybe I'll get more into it as the season progresses, but I'm not watching a lot right now.
Well, what about things, Bob? What about things like starting the 10th inning with a runner on second base, for example? That rule.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't understand that. It's like baseball's kind of a timeless game, and that's one of the things that a lot of people like about it. Are we in such a hurry to get a baseball game over with? Is it so boring that we got to get the hell out of the stadium and turn off the television set as fast as we possibly can? I don't get it. But we've seen so much of this really in every sport. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But they do anyway, no matter what.
Yep. Well, Bob, we're going to let you go in a second here. Al, you got anything you want to impart to Mr. Page before we let him go?
Did you watch anything out of the ordinary during the pandemic? Like, I found myself watching NASCAR, for Christ's sake. Did you, did you watch anything that you would never watch otherwise? I mean, I remember watching like cornhole and axe throwing. Was there anything that caught your eye while we were all waiting for real sports to get back going again?
You guys are full of very good questions tonight. But as you know, I mean, I do consider myself an intellectual, and I have many other interests besides sports. So I actually read serious books, and I do serious Friday and Saturday New York Times crossword puzzles, and I work out all the time. So I can't say that I was really watching anything unusual on TV during the pandemic, but it was a great question, Al. I'll give you that.
Oh boy. Well, Bob, thanks for doing this, and it was great to talk to you again. It's been a long time, and maybe we can hook up next time you're in Michigan.
Well, I was getting to the point, fellas, you're not going to believe this. I have no idea how this happened to me, but later this year, I reach a milestone. 70. I turned 70.
Yeah,
oh boy.
So if you want to be talking to me in the future, you better hurry up, because I don't know what the future is going to hold at my age. Remember what Leach Ravino said about that? At my age, I don't even buy green bananas anymore, and that's kind of where I'm going.
Well, we hope you come back on again, and like I say, next time you're in Michigan, maybe we can all have a meetup somewhere or something.
Anytime, fellas. Call me anytime.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Bob. Robert, appreciate it.
Okay.
Take care.
My pleasure. Yeah.
Bye-bye. Okay. All right.
Let me hit stop, and we're back. I was surprised that Bob he was pretty open about what happened with the podcast. I was surprised that there was so much internal drama.
Yeah, I was too. I kind of thought it was more of an innocent, Eli is, slowing down kind of a thing. But it was a little bit more, I guess I thought that his co-hosts, Bob and Denny McClain, would have been more clued in to what that was all about. And it sounded like the rug was pulled out from under them as well. Mm-hmm. And what started out, they started on the website to say it was just going to be kind of a pause, has now become the end of it. But you're right. I appreciated the candor that Bob gave. He always does, but that was
he always is. Yeah, exactly.
That was really, but usually he's candid about he's about other things, but this is something that he was involved with directly. He minced no words about what happened. So we appreciate
he's
that.
Disappointed. It sounded like he really enjoyed dipping his toe back in the sports opinion market. And it's a shame at what had happened, because they were very entertaining. As we talked about during the interview, that it was very refreshing, having people come with opinions of different sports than what we hear in local sports talk here today. When they're not talking about football, they're talking about the Mount Rushmore of sandwiches or some damn thing. So it's a shame what happened, but it's always fun to talk to Bob, and I can't wait to talk to him again. As he reminded us, he's not getting any younger. So, all right. With that, let's get back to our normal podcast. So, Greg, before we get to talk about little Tigers, little COVID, a little bit of everything, I'm gonna get to the birthday game.
Absolutely. Well, this is a game we like to call "Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro?"
We baked you a birthday cake. If you get a tummy ache and you moan and groan and woe, don't forget we told you so. Happy birthday! Happy birthday!
Everybody knows how we play this game by now. I give Al a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports. And if Al can correctly guess that person within the first two clues, he'll receive, how can I put this? You get one of two. You get your choice, Al, of either an autographed photograph of me or a photographed autograph of me, whatever you choose.
Can I punt? I'll have to make up my mind. Depends how well I do on the questions here. So
either an autographed photograph or a photographed autograph. And here we go.
Right.
This is a person, Al, who made his name in the world of hockey. He is 60 years old today. He was born on this date in 1961. He is a Canadian. He is a Hall of Famer, and I will tell you that he. Should I give you this? Yeah, he was on the blue line. I'll just say it. He was on the blue line, And he played for, believe it or not, 9 teams, which is a lot of teams for a guy who's in the Hall of Fame to play for. But he played for 9 teams, one of which was the Red Wings.
I'll just throw this. How about Paul Coffey?
Very good.
Oh!
Very, very good.
I knew he played for a lot of teams. I didn't realize it was 9.
Yeah. The joke was that sooner or later there'd be an old-timers game featuring 2 teams that Paul played for. It's like, who's he going to play for?
Yeah.
From the old-timers. But Paul was a very offensive-minded defenseman, obviously. He scored, I don't know how many goals he scored. It was a ton for a defenseman. He was made most of his hay with the Oilers, although he won cups with the Penguins, and in addition to Edmonton, never won one in Detroit, but was the person that the Red Wings traded to get Brendan Shanahan
Right.
back in 1996, which is what opened the door to multiple cups after that. Paul, toward the end of his career, became a nomad, played for a lot of different teams, very cups of coffee, no pun intended, for a lot of teams. But still, despite that, a career that was obviously worthy of a Hall of Fame induction. So Paul went into the Hall of Fame in 2004, and is 60 years old today. So congratulations to him. And now you get either a photographed autograph or an autographed photograph. So
I will take the photographed autograph because I can just call you up on Skype and see you anytime. So
okay.
How often can I see your autograph? So
that's true. That's a good point. That's a very good point.
All right. Well, I thank God at least got one good point during this podcast. So, all right. With that, let's move on to the topics du jour this week. And honestly, it's kind of a mishmash this week, Greg, because we're in a dead period with 3 sports in this town. Now, obviously, the Wings are actually their draft lottery tomorrow, the day after we're recording this, and the Pistons are in dead time till their draft lottery in a few weeks, and the Lions, there's nothing going on with them. And the Tigers are the Tigers. There's some stuff to talk about, but I think what's more interesting right now is there's some things going on in the sports world at large, such as NBA fans seem to have lost their minds, and I did forget about the Calvin Johnson, and the Lions might be patching things up, but we might as well start, as I mentioned at the top of the show, about COVID-19. In that, I guess, Greg, I don't want to say the pandemic's over, but we're sure starting to act like it. With about half the country vaccinated, at least in this state, I think we're about 55% vaccinated at this point. And as of today, as we're recording this podcast, Michigan has lifted all outdoor capacity restrictions, which means we will see full stadiums this fall at U of M, at MSU, at Ford Field, or for that matter as well, Comerica Park. Even though they'll be lucky to get $8,000, in September, when there are 20 games under 500, and obviously there's as of July 1st in a month, the same goes for indoor events where they're going to be lifting restrictions. So last year, for example, the Lions played their first 2 home games with nobody in the stands, and at most, at the end of the year, they had 750 people in the stands. So it's interesting to we're starting to see this in games around the country. We're seeing. For example, I have the game Bob was talking about, Tampa Bay, Carolina, on my TV right now, and there's a significant portion of people in the stands right now. It is kind of weird. Because how they say you can get used to anything? And I kind of got used to, sports being played in these kind of enclosed bubbles where there wasn't a lot of noise, or you could actually hear what's going on in the field or on the ice or on the court. And I hated the canned noise that sometimes he would pump in. But all of a sudden when I'm seeing thousands of people in one space, I'm suddenly finding it kind of disconcerting because I was so used to, and we need a social distance, we need to mask up, we need to be careful. And I'm really happy to see that, even I'm starting to feel a little more comfortable being out in public. I've been to a couple family get-togethers over the past few weeks. I hadn't seen family in like over a year for the most part. But you still think we might be moving a little too fast, or, because we still have a significant portion of the population that thinks the goddamn thing's a hoax, which is still unbelievable, or at the very least think that the vaccine is some sort of, global conspiracy to make us all puppets of the Illuminati or something. So, I'm happy we're moving forward, and I miss watching games that had huge crowds, but I still got this little nagging feeling in the back of my head saying we aren't completely clear of this shit. We might be moving too fast, and we're doing this because people are worried about TV contracts. They're worried about political fallout. They're worried about they're rushing to get back to normal, and I just got this little feeling in the back of my head, Greg. It's saying I think we might be moving at least a hair too fast.
Well, I mean, there's always going to be that kind of a concern from reasonable-minded people like yourself about that. I'm encouraged by the number of people, at least in my circle, who've been vaccinated,
right?
And the amount of people in general who've been vaccinated. I think that's what is emboldened. I know that our family, for example, had not done any in-person grocery shopping. We were doing all the curbside stuff until about 3 or 4 weeks ago after we got our second vaccination, and we were clear as far as the CDC says. So we started to kind of slowly venture back into the grocery stores and into Target, and of course still masked up and so forth. And but I can see where because that's not talking. That's not taking into consideration what you're referring to.
No, but it's like that where it still feels kind of disconcerting at first, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah, but
yeah.
Would I go to a ballpark, for example, where there's 25,000 fans, or a stadium? I might go to a ballpark because it's outdoors. Would I go to an indoor arena, stadium?
I would be more likely to go to Comerica Park than I would go to Little Caesars.
But again, it's just the numbers are encouraging, and I know that people still have to be vigilant and so forth. But this is people. We've all lived under a circumstance for the past 14, 15 months. It's been very unnatural and very just goes against the grain of humanity. And so I can see where there comes a time where people just can't. Now, my belief is this is always going to be a thing, but it'll be a thing that we can keep under control, much like the flu with flu shots and things.
Right.
I have no problem, for example, going to get a booster shot if I have to. If my doctor says to me, every year you got to get a COVID shot, I'll get it. I don't care.
Yeah.
But what do I care? Now, when will I take off the masks and so forth? I don't know. I really don't know.
You just took the words out of my mouth. I was going to ask you about that because I could see, maybe for myself, that maybe I'll always carry a mask with me at least for the significant future, because you might find yourself in situations where you may not find yourself around people that you don't exactly trust, or you're in like a grocery store and you got some dingbat hitting you in the back of your feet with his cart, rather than giving you a little bit of space, things like that. And I guess that's the one thing is that I have a feeling like things like masks, and maybe giving people a little more space in public places like in grocery stores and restaurants, or for that matter, maybe leaving the plexiglass shields up in grocery stores, or in other places where we didn't have a sort of barrier before. I have a feeling some of that stuff is here to stay, and that may not be a bad thing.
No, right.
I mean, did you have I didn't even have a cold this winter at all.
Right.
Because I wore a mask everywhere. Also, that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Or for that matter, for as much, when it came to the flu as well, they're saying, well, not a lot of people got the flu because people were washing their hands, they were sanitizing, and they wore a mask. Now, if we could keep that up, I think we would be a healthier populace all the way around, not just in the fight against COVID, but against colds, against flu, against all kinds of transmittable diseases.
As it relates to sports, we're in the baseball season right now, obviously.
Yeah.
So except for the NBA and NHL playoffs, most of the sports that are going on right now are taking place outdoors. The patrons who are attending the games are
patrons. What is this? The Masters? Yeah, we'll get into patrons and fans in a little bit, but yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I digress.
No, so everybody is is, I think more comfortable outdoors than they are indoors. Let's put it that way.
Very much.
There's been the official recommendation by the CDC that if you are vaccinated, you do not have to wear a mask. Period. Almost. I think indoors and outdoors, as long as it's you're not packed in like sardines.
Right.
But I it's funny. I like to when I'm out and I find that when I have my mask on, nobody can see my facial expressions. Mm-hmm. Nobody can see if I'm talking to myself. Yeah. Even, it's kind of almost like you put sunglasses on, and you feel like nobody can see you. I feel like I put my mask on. I feel like I've got this incognito aspect to me where, but the negative to it though is you miss whether or not people are smiling at you. Mm-hmm. If you're smiling at them, they can't necessarily tell that. There's pros and cons to it, but as far as being comfortable of course I don't attend sporting events. I haven't attended sporting events in years because I don't have any real interest to do so. I could watch the games on television. But I don't know when I'll be comfortable going back even now to indoor dining, for example.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Everything's takeout, everything's delivery for us. I don't know when I'll be comfortable enough to go sit down in a restaurant, even though the guidelines say you can. Mm-hmm. Sit down in a restaurant and we probably will. I'm sure we will again sometime. But right now we're content to just do the takeout thing and do the DoorDash thing. And I don't miss a restaurant. I don't miss sitting in a restaurant.
And that's another thing I think we're going to see upheaval in not just sports, but in different industries as well. Like restaurants. I don't think restaurants are ever going to be the same. Just because I have a feeling people realize, I can do a lot of this stuff at home. I can save myself some money. Or, I don't want to sit packed in a bar with 300 other people, breathing and spitting all over me. But I will add this, I'm going to admit a secret to you, Greg.
Okay.
I am a closet pro wrestling fan, specifically AEW. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No, not AEW, no.
Yeah, AEW. I can't stand WWE. Or we're old, we would call it the WWF. Mm-hmm. And they had a pay-per-view this weekend. It was outdoors in an amphitheater called Daly's Place down in Jacksonville. That's where they've been pretty much operating during the entire pandemic, because wrestling is one of the few activities that essentially never stopped. Because they were based in Florida, and in Florida it's been the wild, wild west down there when it came to doing what you want, for the most part anyway. And they had a pay-per-view this weekend, and they had a full house it's an outdoor amphitheater. There were about 6,000 people, and it was packed. And honestly, it was really, really fun to watch, seeing people. I think a lot of the fans, I think, had such a built-up need to just get out and yell and scream and cheer for something that it really enhanced the broadcast. And that's the kind of thing I think that sports are missing, at least for a lot of people. I'm like you. I mean, I really don't miss the idea of sitting cramped in a seat for 3-4 hours to watch a football, baseball game or whatever. I mean, I've done that, been there, wrote the book. I've done it enough. Comfort is more I want to be comfortable watching a game rather than being at the game, if you know what I'm saying. I'm sure you feel the same way. But it was enjoyable to watch people essentially lose their shit. I think being able to cheer for something, anything, for the first time in a year and a half. And we're seeing in other things like NASCAR starting to have full houses again, and golf tournament, for example, the PGA, for example, with Phil Mickelson. That actually, when Mickelson was going down the 18th fairway, and he was being followed by, it looked like, thousands of people. It was both enthralling to see, but it was also, again, kind of scary, disconcerting, because knowing what's going on in the back of my head. But I could appreciate why the people are acting like they were. I just wish maybe they need to tone things down a little bit, because we just aren't fully out of the woods. But we're seeing people, I think, go a little overboard when it comes to their reactions to sports right now, being there in person.
Well, yeah, it might be like a pent-up emotion or something. We could go on and on, because this is going to change people, Al. You know this for forever, probably.
Yeah,
some
it will.
People. This is not like, I've often compared this whole thing to something that it's not. And what it's not is like a tornado warning or tornado watch where it's announced.
Yeah.
Okay, it's over with, guys. You can come out now. This is not like that. This does not have an end date or time. We've made progress, of course, but there's never going to be a time where everybody just says it's officially done, guys. It's over with. So because there's no official end date or time, it'll be interesting to see how people, and even my company has not been back in the office officially for 14 months, and we won't be going back until at least December because we're waiting to move into a new building. But how different it will be just to see people again, how their personalities may have changed, or how their I don't know. You just don't know. There's just if you work in human resources for any organization, this is a nightmare situation because you don't know. You're trying to please a bunch of different people. You can't really enforce anything. You can recommend or gently request, but it's hard for companies who have HR departments to they're going to be faced with different people who are have different levels of comfort. Yeah, we've even said, look, we'll be going back to the office in December. Well, we're going to be doing it gradually. We're going to not have full capacity for quite some time. But we've also said that if you don't feel comfortable doing that, then you can certainly talk to your supervisor about making other arrangements or so forth. And that's where it becomes the human resource thing becomes. And if you're a manager or a supervisor, these are things that nobody has ever had to contend with before. More and more companies are learning how to work from home and so forth. But to then say, to now have to be respectful of other people's comfort levels. Some people are chomping at the bit to get back to the office. Some people really enjoy not being at the office.
I would say some people would be happy never going back to the office.
Right.
Because commutes, because of daycare, all kinds of different reasons.
Well, yeah, but on the other hand, there are some people, Al, who, because of that daycare scenario, are eager to get back to the office because it's hard to do your job when that distinction between your home life and your professional life has been blurred. It used to be, I go to work and I don't have to worry about the kids or deal with the kids because I'm at work. And then when I'm at home, I don't have to worry about work. Well, now that line has been blurred. You can be at home and worry about work. You can be doing your work and worrying about your kids. It's all happening around you. Now, I'm fortunate enough that I don't have small children. So it was easy for me to adapt to the work from home scenario. But there are some other people who are school-age children who, I can't even imagine what that's like to not homeschool necessarily, but to do the virtual school thing. And I thank God I don't have that kind of a worry. But there are some people who do, and but it's beyond that, Al. It's not just kids. It's people who are caring for elderly people, or just people who just don't feel comfortable. You can see the numbers can drop all they want, and the progress can be made. The vaccinations can occur. There's still going to be people that just feel funny about, and there's agoraphobia, for example. They said that people may realize that they have contracted, if you will. That's as crazy as that sounds, agoraphobia. That now they've been inside for so long. Do they want to go out there again? I've even read stories of people who have quit their jobs because they don't want to go back to the office.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
So
exactly.
It's it's going to change life forever. Obviously, it's much bigger than sports, clearly, but it's going to change everybody's life forever.
Yeah, and it does make you wonder if maybe the way sports is covered is going to change forever too, because reporters, beat guys have been doing Zoom video conferences to talk to people rather than going to locker rooms. Right. I'm wondering if players. This is kind of segue into our next topic anyway. That it's kind of going to the players specifically are saying, hey, I am fine with this. I am fine with. I'll answer your questions over video. Ask away. I don't want to have to deal with you guys violating my personal space while I'm in a towel being asked, how do I feel about this win or loss? So I could see, in different sports saying, maybe reporters won't be allowed back in the locker rooms ever. because that also takes away the issue of who's covering them, be it a male or a female, for example. And so I could see changes there, or how games are covered for that matter. Because I have a feeling we're going to see a lot more of, as we've seen even right in the playoffs right now, of play-by-play being called remotely. And I think that's here to stay, especially when it comes to small college basketball and football. ESPN is not going to send a play-by-play and color guy to Ypsilanti to call the Eastern game when they can just have two guys sitting in chairs in an office in Bristol, Connecticut, and will call the game. I think that's going to be, if anything changes, I think that's going to be the two biggest ones right there. How the games are covered, how they're broadcast. We'll see more remote cameras. We'll have more remote broadcasting, remote play-by-play, and remote coverage from the beat guys. And I'm sure they're not going to like it, but I have a feeling that might be the new normal.
And I don't know that a regular, garden variety listener can even tell, Al, if a game is being called by announcers who are physically in the ballpark or not. I mean, I don't know if you can flick on a game and immediately say, "Oh, those guys aren't called. Those guys aren't there. They're in a studio." I don't know that you can necessarily determine that. I've noticed, for example, kind of Matt Shepard, some of his calls of home runs. That seem to be like when you see the home run where it lands in the stands. It's like 10, 12 rows back. Well, if he were in the ballpark, physically in the ballpark, and he saw that ball launch off the bat, he could probably call it a lot quicker that it's gone.
Right.
Now I've noticed, that's the one thing I have noticed. I've noticed that these home runs that are could be, might be, well, then it lands 15 rows back. It's like, well, then I have to remind myself, well, Shep probably isn't in the ballpark, so he can't see that the trajectory of that ball. You even as a fan, you can tell if you're at the game if a ball is going to be a home run or not, usually. But when you're watching it on a monitor, obviously, he doesn't have the benefit of seeing the trajectory. He's just seeing the ball. He's watching it in real time like you are. So that's one thing that I do notice about calling the games remotely is the home run calls can be a little bit awkward, a little bit clunky. But ultimately, it's not. Ultimately, who cares? Ultimately, it's you watch the game for entertainment. Sometimes people even turn the sound off or listen to Dan Dickerson or something, whatever, or just play music and just have the game on in the background. So you don't really notice that much anyway. But that is one thing I've noticed about not calling games in the ballpark are the home run calls.
Yeah. And this kind of leads us into the next topic, is that I got one question for you, Greg. Have NBA fans lost their freaking minds?
Fans in general.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. As I talked about what happened at the PGA Championship. But during the NBA's first round of playoffs, Greg, fans have been clueless, awful. We've seen racism. We've seen them throwing things at players. We've seen last night someone running on the court in middle of the game. After a year and a half of players, they played in relative peace. They weren't being ridiculed and insulted and ragged upon for a year and a half. They seem to be very cognizant now of like, how come we've put up with this for so long? Of guys and from fans, especially in the NBA, because the seats are right on the goddamn court, and that they are being targeted with some virulent, nasty, racist talk from the fans, and they're like, why are we putting up with this? We should not have to put up with this. And now they are not shy about calling this out. The latest example being Kyrie Irving essentially calling Boston a racist city, and he brought up the history that city has with racism with their own athletes. So, but I guess this does kind of spill into our last topic, in that I think we're seeing fans over-exuberant, maybe, or I don't know if I want to say they're taking things too personally. Like, for example, they got on Kyrie Irving's case, and they were calling him everything, the N-word and everything else in Boston because he stomped on the logo on the court. And why in the hell are you taking that personally? And it's such. They're like, it disrespected us. I don't think you're a Celtic, are you? I don't think the Boston Celtics gave a give a rat's ass if he does it. It's the fans who make this stuff bigger than it really should be. But seeing the reaction coming out of some of these NBA games, and Kyrie Irving being called the N-word, and Russell Westbrook having the things thrown at him, and it's absolutely bonkers how fans are acting, Greg. I'm sure some of it is just pent up frustration and not being able to the life starting to come back to normal after a year and a half. But I mean, some of this is absolutely ridiculously stupid. I'm totally at the players on this. There is no reason they've been putting up with this crap for years. They really do need to start cracking down on it. And then I see like the guy who dumped the popcorn on Westbrook's head, for example. He's been banned from the arena for life. Big deal. Obviously he's being charged. He'll end up in court and probably get a misdemeanor or something like that. But yeah, the guy could put on sunglasses, grow a beard, and who's going to know the difference? So I mean, they really need to start. They have to start dropping the hammer on some of these people for the idiocy that they're pulling off right now, because it's worse than it's always been there. It just feels like it's becoming worse and worse.
Where's Mike Curtis when you need him? Do you get that? Do you get that reference? You're old enough to get that reference, right?
Oh yeah.
Well, it's kind of what Bob was saying, and when we talked to him about social issues and how it's going to piss people off if you get too much into that as an athlete.
Right.
I thought you asked an excellent question, by the way, and he didn't. I wouldn't say he didn't have an answer for it, but he really he made him think. That question you asked about, were athletes back then, and when he was covering sports, did they have views that maybe they were suppressing? Yeah. But so some of this, there's always been this underlying feeling from fans that, hey, I pay my ticket, I can do whatever I want, I can yell anything I want at you, I can get personal, I can do whatever, you can't touch me, I can do whatever I want. And now you mix that in with that pent-up thing that we were talking about, that pent-up emotion, along with these fans who are ticked off about the social social aspect of things, how social issues in sports have become so intertwined. You've got the recipe for these kind of bad actors who are hey, how about Steffi Graf when she was attacked on the court?
Monica Seles, who got stabbed.
Seles, sorry, not Steffi.
Monica Seles was stabbed.
Monica Seles stabbed on the court.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that we're going to see something
worse.
Yeah, or just as bad. These fans, the fans running out of the field and out of the court. I mean, that's mostly harmless because it's strictly an attention grab. It's not really to do any harm to anyone. It's just to be on the field. It's just to be on the court. It's nothing more than that usually. Nobody goes on the court or the field with any real ill intent other than they just want to call attention to themselves. Now, I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying that they're not necessarily going out there to cause anybody any harm. In fact, they rarely ever approach anyone. I mean, they just run around. They're not trying to, unless you're Morgana the Kissing Band and you're trying to go up and kiss George Brett or something. But other than that, you're just running around and like an actor.
Remember how that just was thought of as harmless? Essentially, she'd run out and kiss a guy and then run back into the stands.
Right. Right.
But we're in a completely different era now.
Oh yeah, it reminds me of a streaker who ran out on the field. I'm not sure if this happened when Yogi Berra was with the Mets or the Yankees, and somebody asked Yogi, was it a man or a woman? And he said, I couldn't tell. They had a bag over their head.
Oh boy!
But you want to say it's just harmless idiots being idiots, but
it's harmless till it's not harmless.
Yeah, that's exactly. Somebody's gonna go do something crazy, and we've already seen it. I mean, not in the sports world, but in the world in general, we've seen what kind of crazy can happen out there.
Yeah.
So why would you think that professional sports are immune to some sort of nut job going out there and who doesn't care about his own well-being, going out there and committing a heinous act in front of millions of people? That's why wouldn't you think that? I mean, when a guy runs on a quarter or somebody like that, something like that, you can't just say, oh, this is just some idiot running. What if this guy pulls out a knife and stabs one of the players, or does or shoots somebody, or whatever? I mean, it's a different world, like you said, and different types of fears, and like you said, it's fun until it's not fun anymore. Yeah,
and it just bothers me when fans take this stuff so personally. They're disrespecting me.
Right.
When they think when they're just insulting an inanimate object logo or a $1 billion franchise, and I think that's what gets me, is that there are too many people in this world who take what happened on the field of play, on the court, on the ice, as a personal affront to themselves, and I just can't wrap my head around why they get like that. As you said, and also then they go to a game and they feel like they have the absolute right to do and say anything they want, and often crossing the line from being a pest to being criminal. So, because for example, I saw comments after the popcorn incident. It was just popcorn. It didn't hurt him. Westbrook didn't know that. He didn't know what could have, something could have been in that. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Or the next time it could be something far worse. I don't hate to go there, but what someone was so pissed off he threw acid in his face, or something, for example. You know what I'm saying? I mean, obviously I'm talking extreme examples, but if I'm a person, these guys in a lot of ways are exposed and they have no way of protecting themselves, especially when they're leaving a court, like with the Westbrook incident. And I can understand why these guys are going. If I on the next bargaining agreement, I mean, if I'm the NBA players or the NHL players, NFL, MLB, whatever, I'm wanting some changes in how security is done. I'm wanting changes in how fan interaction is done. I want changes as to how maybe even arenas are set up. So, these guys aren't as exposed to the dangers of a crazed fan. I mean, it's something. I don't think we're at the point yet where we're going to see something god awful, but people, probably said the same thing before. God forbid, like 9/11. Oh, we'll never be attacked in this country, and then look what happened. So, it's just, I hate to think that. We're headed to the point where these players will have to play in a bubble all the goddamn time. But I think for their sanity, they wouldn't mind it.
Al, you mentioned a little while ago about fans taking things too personally and so forth. And if these fans think they're emotionally wrapped up in these games that they're watching usually on television or even in person, they're not nearly as wrapped up emotionally as the players. I can guarantee you that.
Right.
There's if the fans think they care more about, and some fans do, think they care more about whether their team wins or loses than the players do, they're full of shit.
Yeah.
And these players who are walking off the court, for example, let's say they just lost a tough game on a buzzer-beating shot or something.
Right.
Or if they lost, doesn't matter how they lost. Let's just say they lost in general. These guys, in the wake of that, I can guarantee when they're walking back to the locker room, they're not thinking about anything other than how pissed they are about losing that game. They're you can say whatever you want about overpaid athletes and they don't care, baloney. Yeah. These guys are they compete at the highest level against the highest level of competition, and nobody likes to lose. And you could purport to think that your emotions as a fan supersede those of some guy who's been sweating his butt off and playing this game that you've been watching. If you think your emotions supersede that and trump that, you're nuts.
Yeah,
absolutely nuts. So you want to do something crazy like throw popcorn at somebody or throw a drink at somebody. That's what that whole Malice at the Palace, by the way. That's how that.
Yeah, that's how it started. Somebody threw a beer at the
test.
Yeah,
well,
right.
That's the fuse that can be lit. It doesn't matter that it was just a drink or just popcorn. I mean, these guys are in the thick of competition And the last thing they wanted, remember that brawl when the Bruins went into the stands at Madison Square Garden?
Yeah.
And okay, well, that was after the game. That was after a game the Bruins won.
Yeah.
But because the fans crossed that line, I think they took somebody's stick or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's just enough is enough. So somebody's going to do something stupid. The Mike Curtis thing, we laughed about that.
Yeah.
Curtis flattened the guy.
Right.
But hey, we saw what could happen. The Malice in the Palace thing was an example of what can happen to when the fuse gets lit. It just takes the right kind of player, the right emotion, the right moment. I don't blame these guys for being drunk. I don't care if it was just a drink or a box of popcorn. I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, it's none of that is should be tolerated. And somebody, we're sitting here talking about how somebody's going to do something stupid from the fan standpoint and cause harm. Well, somebody could also do something stupid that doesn't seem to be all that harmless or all that harmful, who's going to get a response that's going to be over the top.
That's a great point.
And the problem is, Al, is that the response from the athlete is going to be vilified. You know it.
Yeah.
The response from the athlete is going to be vilified. It's going to be looked at as an overreaction, and in the court of public opinion, it's like, well, boy, he really, what a hothead. Well, these people. I remember a goalie. I can't remember which goalie it was. Said, about being a goalie. He said, "Can you imagine being at work and every time you made a mistake at work, a red light went on and 16,000 fans booed you?"
Yeah.
Well, that's what being a goalie is like. Mm-hmm. I know people don't want to hear that. They don't want to feel any empathy. They feel like these athletes are there to entertain them and nothing else. They have no emotions. They're robots. They have no emotions. They're not people. No empathy. I don't care what they feel like or what kind of, if they're uncomfortable. They're paid a lot of money, so because they're paid a lot of money, that washes everything away. Mm-hmm. It's not a good attitude.
Yeah, just seeing this stuff just makes me hate fans all the more sometimes. I mean, I hate telling people how to fan, but things just seem to be. Some fans just their obsession is it's mind-boggling to me. I just can't get over it. And I hope we can get past this stuff, but that's my fear. You made a great point that the next time someone dumps a box of popcorn on a ball player's head, the reaction may not just be him pointing at the guy. The next one may be the next Malice at the Palace or worse. And I wouldn't blame the player one iota for wanting to kick someone's ass. And the thing is, he would kick that guy 3 ways from Sunday.
Well, you know what it is, Al? Well. It's their place of work. I know it's public. I know it's public, and I know it's in front of 20,000 people, if you're or more, depending what venue you're at.
Yeah. But
you would no more tolerate some into your place of business and acting a fool.
Yeah.
Walking in, if I was in my office sitting, my idiot comes running into my building and pours popcorn on me or calls me names or something, you would no more tolerate that.
Yeah.
It's just people don't seem to understand that's the same thing. They think, oh no, that's not the same. What is? Mm-hmm. This is. I don't care how much money they're being paid. This is their profession. This is their place of work, and that you have to respect that boundary. And for whatever reason, people feel like because these athletes are paid a lot of money and because they paid $40 to get in, that means that they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, and it's I don't know. It's just seeing what's happened to this country in general over the past year and a half. It's been eye-opening in a lot of bad ways, and we've just seen how horrible people can be. And what we're seeing happening right now with how fans are acting during sport events, it's just a microcosm of what's going on in this country right now. All right, with that, we've been talking a lot of big picture, macro type stuff. Why don't we just drill down? We got to talk a little Detroit sports and the Tigers, Greg. And they had an okay May, amazingly enough. They finished the month above 500 at 14-13. They're 22-32 overall. They're actually winning tonight. They're in Milwaukee, but the game's still early. But regardless of that, the starting pitching has become the strength of this team. For first 2 months of the season and change. They have an ERA at 3.76, got a WHIP of 1.22. OPS plus is 94. And obviously 100 is average. So the pitching has been above average to pretty darn good. And let's not even forget, Greg, Spencer Turnbull tossed a no-hitter in Seattle, the 8th in Detroit history, the first since 2011 from Justin Verlander when he shut down the Blue Jays. That was his second no-hitter as a Tiger, but that's the first one since Verlander. And the starting pitching really has been a lot of fun to watch. Obviously, Turnbull is shown to be the ace of the staff. He's always had stuff. It looks like he's finally starting to put things together. And the two rookies on the staff, Casey Mize and Tarek Skubal, are also starting to figure things out. Over the past 5 starts, Casey Mize has an ERA of 1.74. He has a WHIP of 0.8. Skubal, his last 5 starts, 3.33 ERA, a K per 9 of 13.9. I mean, that's pretty damn good. I mean, we're still talking small sample sizes. We're talking, these guys are throwing 5-6 inning games. They're essentially being used for the first 2 times around the order. They're being taken out before they see the teams the third time in the order, and they go into the bullpen, which has its own big set of issues other than Fulmer and Soto. But it's fun to see some actually pretty darn good starting pitching. And actually, they're getting another pretty good start tonight. I believe Matt Boyd's on the mound. So it was actually a pretty decent month of baseball. I mean, this team is still struggling mightily offensively for the most part. But starting pitching is actually looking pretty damn good and might be the future strength of this team, which I won't say it came out of the blue because there's a lot of high draft picks involved here. But it's just nice to see young pitchers starting to figure it out, and maybe some of this credit needs to go to the new pitching coach, Chris Fetter.
I think a lot of it has to go to Chris Fetter. Frankly, he's starting to get some national play now. I know the Athletic did a piece on him about how under his guidance the pitchers are starting to figure things out. There really isn't anybody, Al, in the rotation that you look at and say, oh gosh, we have no chance of winning tonight because that guy's on the mound. So that's nice. I mean, you feel like there's 5 guys that on any given night will give the team a chance to win. There isn't really a stinker among the group. I mean, they're not all great, but there really isn't a guy that just is like the outlier who's going to, when he starts, you don't have a chance.
Yeah.
So that's nice to see. You mentioned the offense, and I mentioned in the interview with Bob that, offense in general is down, of course, throughout baseball. Not just
it's like Detroit. A third dead ball era all of a sudden.
Yeah, almost. But, yeah, I mean, that's always been the hook with this rebuild has been, well, just wait till you see our young pitchers. Yeah. And that's fine, and we are seeing them, and they are starting to, the Mises of the world and Skubal and so forth, and Boyd is having a career year, but it's still about offense. We were talking about again, I'll once again mention the Bob Page interview. We were talking about basketball and how the 3-point shot is taking over, and it's all about offense, and that's what the fans want to see. Well, in this day and age, offense is at a premium, obviously, judging just simply by the numbers of what's out there right now. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of teams can boast some strong pitching, and it's still fair to critique the Tigers on whether or not the position players that they're bringing into the mix are keepers or not. And it's, Jacoby Jones, I don't think is going to figure it out. They finally sent him down. He's 29. I think you've mentioned it before. He's 29 years old. Mm-hmm. He was sent down recently. And I'm hearing that even in the minors, he's really scuffling. I mean, this kid's career might be over. I mean, I don't know that he's ever going to. I mean, he may just be a career minor leaguer. I don't think he may not make it back to the big leagues. So the jury is still out, and it's fair to wonder, okay, where are the Willie Castros of the world? Was last year's performance, a fluke? He's struggling offensively. Yep. A lot of guys that are struggling, and you just wonder I just hate for the Tigers to be the next New York Mets, which had all these. Bob Page mentioned DeGrom. Yeah, DeGrom's great, but what if the Mets won with all that pitching? At one time they had 4 or 5 starters. They almost like the Braves of the '90s had all these great starters, and at least the Braves won divisions. The Mets didn't really figure it out. They never really built an offense.
Nope.
That's another dysfunctional franchise, by the way.
Yeah.
They haven't really figured out. They never figured it out when they had the likes of DeGrom and Matz and help me out here. The other guys that were in that rotation. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. They never really figured it out, position player wise, to support those guys, and they missed an opportunity. They had lights out pitching, but they didn't. They never figured out the rest of the team, and so I just hope the Tigers aren't one of these teams, Al, that has figured out the pitching thing, but has not done so with the position players, and it's just. I think the jury is still out, and it's fair to wonder if these guys that these kids that they're bringing through to play the other 8 positions are genuine big leaguers, and if they can be the core of a playoff team.
Yeah, that's at this point that's the main question. Where's the position players? I mean, if this team's going to contend 3-4 years from now, who on this team is still going to be on that roster? Maybe Candelario. Other than that, no, those impact players aren't here yet. They're hoping it's going to be Torkelson or Riley Green, Parker Meadows, but a couple, a few other, Clemens, Daniel Cabrera, there's a few other guys,
Trey Cruz,
that have been drafted over the past couple years. They're hoping, but and we've said it time and time again. When you, on this podcast, if you're betting on prospects, the odds are you're going to lose. So. They need a couple of these guys not just to be major league players. They need a couple of these guys to be stars, to be all-star caliber players. And this team has a track record of being unable to develop those kind of players. I mean, the last legitimate all-star caliber player this team, and was not just a one-time. No, you made the All-Star team because we had to get somebody on it. But multiple-time All-Star, you'd probably have to go back to Travis Fryman, who was a homegrown product, who made multiple All-Star teams as a Tiger. Because the other position players who, for the most part, who made multiple All-Star teams were either guys who were picked up in trades or free agency, or were guys like Rob Fick and Tony Clark who, we have to pick somebody, so you're it. So that's my concern, is that this team has a history of not being able to develop young players, specifically position players. So, the pitching, they seem to, especially with Federer now, they seem to have figured it out somewhat. But, they desperately need some of their draft picks over the past couple years to not just hit, but hit big. And that's a big ask. It really is. I mean, there's going to be so much pressure on Spencer Torkelson being the first overall draft pick. Being picked so high that being picked so high in the first round that if he's anything less than an all-star, he's going to be considered a bust. I mean, I hate to put that kind of pressure on him, but that's a fact.
I know, but it's not even just about Torkelson and Green. They got to hit on guys below that.
Yeah.
Both of us just spouted out a few names a few minutes ago. I mean, it can't always just be the guys that were drafted in the top 5 overall.
Yeah. Like Skubal was a 10th round pick. They need a couple guys like that to show up.
Right, exactly. That's to your point about not developing position players. It's kind of like the same beef that we've all had with the Lions. It's like everybody could, you and I could draft in the first round. That's not the issue. It's finding those players later on. The Pittsburgh Steelers that was great drafts in the 70s, they weren't all first-round draft picks. Mm-hmm. A lot of them were 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. Look at the Red Wings.
Yeah.
For years made their hay with these guys are 12th, 13th, 14th round afterthoughts, essentially. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying you have to dig that deep, but my gosh, you got to be able to hit on players that aren't these heralded. You mentioned the pressure on guys like Torkelson. Well, yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. Well, one of the reasons why there's pressure on Torkelson, at least right now,
Right.
Is that you don't see a lot of other guys that were drafted below that you can get excited about. How long before we start to get tired of hearing about Daz Cameron, for example?
Yeah, really.
Some guys are just, after a while, it becomes like, you mentioned Candelario. I know he's still on the younger side, but he's not a kid either. Mm-mm. I mean, there's a point where, nobody talks about. We talk a lot about these younger kids, and we're not even at the big league level yet. But what about the window of opportunity that guys like Candelario, for example, you know how fast time goes. You blink and he's gonna be 30. That's the way it goes. It's like, oh gosh, now the guys we were counting on 4 years ago that we got on these when we flipped all these veterans to get these young kids 4 or 5 years ago. All of a sudden, now those trades are 7-8 years in the rearview mirror. Yeah. And then it's like, oh my gosh, we traded. Remember when we traded Verlander 7 years ago, and we still don't have the makings of a team that can contend for a playoff spot. And I think that's a legitimate concern. That I'm not trying to curry favor with the fans, because there are a lot of fans that don't know the game. But that's a legitimate fans who have that concern, Al. Have my respect, because that's a legitimate concern.
Yeah.
Now,
will
it all shake itself out in the next year or two? I don't know. That's why my proposal is that the Tigers go out this offseason and sign players. I don't care about Miguel Cabrera's contract. That's the only big contract that's on the books right now, so I don't want to hear about that. Go out and buy some players. You got to accelerate this. You got to take pressure off these kids. You got to bring in some veteran stars so that guys like Torkelson and Green et al. Don't feel like the weight of the franchise is on their shoulders.
Right.
Bring in people that have been around the block and I'm not talking bargain basement 1 year, $2 million contracts. I'm talking about genuine stars. I'm told that this off season is supposed to be a pretty good class of free agents, position players. Well, the Tigers better get involved. You got to get involved in these players. You got to start talking to these guys and at least being serious about signing them, because this is a very crucial point of the rebuild. I've always said it's easy to start a rebuild. It's not so easy to know when to either A, finish it, or B, accelerate it. And the Tigers right now are at that stage, in my opinion, where they need to, at the very least, accelerate this thing, if not get out of it entirely. And the way you do that is by bringing in established big league ball players who have resumes, and guys that aren't I'm not talking about the clearance rack. I'm not genuine big league stars, and they'll come. They will come here. This isn't the NBA Detroit, where that's Siberia. Detroit in baseball is a lot bigger, but it's much easier to sell Detroit, especially with A.J. Hinch, than it would be any other. So, this is a very crucial point now. Yeah. Very crucial point of the rebuild, and to me, it can tip either way, and it's because of the position players, not the pitching. It's the position players that can make this tip either way. Yeah.
It's that's one of the things I find refreshing about Hinch. Is that, for example, when earlier in the year when he was asked about Jake Rogers, and he said, Rogers isn't a kid. He's going to be 26.
Yeah. Right.
He needs to prove he's a big leaguer. He's running out of chances. Now, it's the same thing of Jacoby Jones, where you hear fans saying, oh, yeah, that Jacoby Jones, he's some prospect. He can still do something. He's 29. I can't believe we have people in the Tigers fan base calling Jacoby Jones a prospect. He's pushing 30, for Christ's sake. I mean, that's the mindset of the fan base sometimes. They need to realize that, these guys don't remain prospects forever. A prospect is someone 20 to 24 years old, if that. Guys in their early 20s. When you're hitting 25, 26, 27 years old, you're not a prospect. You are what you are. Right. You need to prove that you're a big league ball player. I think Jake Rogers, by the way he's playing, now he's been called up again, I think he realizes that this might be my last chance at the Tigers to at least prove I'm a capable not a starting catcher, a capable, excellent defensive backup catcher, and so far we're seeing stuff like that. So, but yeah, that's the thing. I think Hinch might be the fulcrum in this, that this might tip the scales, because, Hinch didn't come here to be a placeholder manager or to be the Ralph Houck type or the Gardenhire type who's just here for a few years, keep the seat warm, and then they get the guy. The Tigers hired him as the guy, and if this team isn't doing, if Hinch doesn't think this team is doing anything, and management wise, procuring players and developing players 2 years from now even. He's gone, and because I don't think he'd have trouble finding another gig in a second. So, the Tigers, I agree with you here. The Tigers are at a tipping point with this rebuild, is that they need to be aggressive at the trade deadline. They need to be aggressive at the in free agency next year, and they need to be starting to be aggressive with some of these prospects. It's time. Some of these guys that have been percolating. Remember how we used to complain about the Red Wings keeping They kept the guys in Grand Rapids far too long, let them percolate till they were overripe. That's my fear with some of these Tigers prospects. You can't baby them forever. You just got to ultimately, like Daz Cameron, for example. It's getting to the point of him. Throw him in the big leagues, see if he sinks or swims. The Tigers need to start doing that with some of these prospects rather than saying they need more time at AAA when there essentially has been no minor leagues for a year and a half. So, they got to start figuring things out when it comes to stuff. They really do.
Yep, agreed.
All right, with that, I think we need to start hitting the home stretch, Greg. So, there's a couple other topics I want to touch on, but I think we can save them to the next show because, Miguel Cabrera, that topic's not going anywhere. And we'll have, on the next show, we'll be able to talk about some draft lotteries and, what maybe some more Lions news. So, let's start hitting hit the go home button, and let's move on to who is your jerk of the week. Who you got?
Well, this Aaron Rodgers Green Bay Packers thing is kind of interesting.
It's a drama. It's like a soap opera at this point.
Right. But I'm going to put the onus, I'm going to give the jerk of the week out to the Packers because I always tend to err on the side of the player when it comes to this kind of scenario. You've got a player like Rodgers who's obviously won. He's won big. He's got a Super Bowl ring under his on his hand, and was won ton of playoff games. Now you can say that maybe he's he's being a prima donna or whatever, but you know what? Teams, to me, the reason I put the onus on the team is that I look at it as I'm an employer who has a good employee. Okay, now he may not be an angel or a saint, but he's a pretty good employee. He's done a good job for a number of years. I tend to err on the side of you better kind of not kowtow to that player, but certainly respect him enough to not jack him around. Okay?
Yeah.
And I think that the Rodgers drama, like you said, kind of started when the Packers, I don't think, this is my opinion from afar, weren't really upfront with him about that 2020 draft when they drafted that guy. I can't remember what his name was now. When they drafted, who did they draft as quarterback? Which got them all ticked off. Well, you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know that the Packers were, and they got the new coach. And
Jordan Love. Jordan Love. Yeah.
I'm not sure the Packers were up front with Aaron Rodgers. And to the folks that would say to me, well, hey, that he's just another player. He doesn't have anything to say. Well, no, I don't think that's the case. I think when you're the starter quarterback who's going to go in the Hall of Fame without question, and you've done all you've done for their organization as Rodgers has done for Green Bay, and by the way, Aaron Rodgers has not had a lot of Pro Bowl receivers to throw to, by the way. Okay?
Right.
I think you kind of got to get this guy got to get him to buy in. Now, sooner or later, obviously, they're going to have to draft his replacement. It's not necessarily about that they drafted Love. I'm not sure that they really were up front with Rodgers about drafting Love. That's my concern. Yeah. And I think that's what started this whole thing. I know the court of public opinion, a lot of people are going to side with the Packers. I'm siding with Rodgers. I think the Packers are bumbling this big time, and it's never a good idea to piss off your star player. Now there's talk that he's not even going to play for the Packers this year. Well, okay. I just think the whole thing is avoidable. Yeah. Again, I'm not there. I don't know. I'm not either of those. I'm not Rodgers, and I'm not the management. But my observation is that this whole thing got got off on the wrong foot. This whole drafting Love thing got off on the wrong foot. I'm not saying the Packers should have needed Rodgers' permission to draft Love, because that's ridiculous. But I just think like the whole thing was handled clumsily, and it's still festering. It's not going away. And Rodgers just had an MVP season, and it's still not going away.
Yeah.
So I just, my jerk of the week is the Packers for just, taking. I mean, as a Lions guy, I'm all for the Packers having dysfunction, but I think the Packers are bungling this myself.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's it could have easily been avoided if they just maybe clued him into what their future plans were, or what how they were going to proceed with building the team. Because I agree with you that I think the Packers, considering how talented Rodgers is the quarterback, should have won more than one Super Bowl with him as their quarterback. He's that damn good. Yet, because he's literally had to put that franchise on his shoulders, and and then Jordan Love. The Packers have been extremely lucky, Greg, over the past 2.5 decades. They have back-to-back Hall of Fame quarterbacks in Favre and then Rodgers. They're not going to get lucky a third time with a guy like Jordan Love. So, I guess Schadenfreude, that it's fun to see another supposed class organization piss off a Hall of Fame player, and they may just walk off and say, "The hell with this! I don't need this anymore," a la Barry Sanders or Calvin Johnson. So I can see exactly where you're coming from. I'm with you. The Packers are shooting themselves in the foot how they're handling this. I completely agree with you. All right, there's a few ways I can go with the jerk of the week. I was thinking, they're, between fans being complete assholes, and I was thinking about going in that direction, but I have to go with Marcel Ozuna, who was of the Braves, who was arrested and charged with choking and hitting his wife, and he's on the injured list, for Christ's sake. But and the thing that this is not just, I wouldn't say he said, she said. The cops actually witnessed him doing this, and this is one of those things where, and the thing is, the Braves just signed him to a 4-year, multi-million-dollar deal. I think they signed him like 4 years, $40 or $50 million. It's all guaranteed, no matter what. But if I'm the Braves, I mean, this shit's, it's on video. I'm sure there's, a body cam footage of this, and there's pictures of him being arrested, and there's pictures of his significant other having the shit beat out of her. How can you even leave this guy in the roster at this point? I would, in any good conscience, the Braves should say, we're just going to eat the $40-50 million. We're just going to, we can't have a guy like you on our roster. Goodbye, good riddance. Right. And even worse is that I read today that the Braves bought broadcaster Chip Carey when he mentioned the only way he mentioned the Ozuna situation in the middle of a game. He said he is in injury limbo. Injury limbo. Guy's in freaking jail. No, he's he's in injury limbo. In jail, maybe in limbo. So my jerk of the week is obviously Ozuna and the Braves and how this whole thing is being handled. Ozuna's a scumbag, and the Braves are a shit organization anyway. At least the way they've handled a lot of things over the pandemic, and their reaction to the All-Star game being pulled out, and now they're simply letting Major League Baseball. We'll wait on Major League Baseball's investigation. What investigation? The guy's been witnessed trying to kill his wife. So that's my jerk of the week. Ozuna and the Braves. The whole situation is an absolute mess. If the Braves had any kind of conscience at all, they'd cut ties with this guy yesterday.
Right.
Oh, my God, Greg.
Agreed.
Oh, what a fun podcast this has been, hasn't it? All right, with that, let's get the hell out of here. So can you get out the plugs and the thank yous and all the social media stuff?
Sure. Thanks, of course, to Bob Page for helping us celebrate 12 years. We're going to be bringing back some other guests, or some of our favorite guests, throughout the summer. I promise you that, to kind of extend the celebration, just to catch up with folks again. It's been a while, and for some of these people, so we'll be doing that. So I hope everybody enjoyed that candid discussion with Bob. And once again, remind everyone to read me at my Out of Bounds WordPress blog every week. Follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno, and follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. And I want to thank my lovely wife Sharon for putting up with this nonsense every 2 weeks, and thank you, Big Al, for making Tuesday nights so gosh darn fun.
Yes, and thank you, Greg, for just being you. So, yeah, I know. And there's one annual guest that I wish we could have back, but the late great Jamie Samuelson, may he rest in peace. He always went out of his way to take some time out of his very busy schedule and talk.
I was just thinking about him today. I was literally thinking about him when we were talking about.
Yeah, that was one one death that really broadsided me. Because he was very much a friend of the show, and he's greatly missed. Not by us, but the entire Detroit sports community. But with that, again, thank you, Greg, for being you, and take good care of Bean. I know you don't. You keep saying, "Oh, my kids are grown." You got one still in the house.
That's true. That's true.
All right. To listen to the show, as always, we're on all the usual places: Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Music, Deezer, Radio Public. Essentially, take your podcast aggregator that you'd like to use, do a search for the Knee Jerks, Eno and Big Al. Usually the Knee Jerks is more than enough. And please subscribe, please like, please comment. You know the drill. And, it's just so you get notified and you'll be able to download the podcast whenever it becomes available. We're also on the kneejerks.net. I guess you call that the homepage. That is the where you'll find the show notes, where you can do a direct download on your computer browser, get the MP3 to do what you will. Again, as Greg said, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're all over the place, and as Greg said to start the show, it's going to be the summer of the Knee Jerks. So until later in the summer, or 2 weeks into June anyway, we'll see you then. Well, I'm sure we'll have lots to discuss, especially when it comes to draft lotteries and what's going on in Detroit sports. This is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha.
Shout out, everybody. We'll see you too.